Yes, people, this is Dominic Lowman, also known as Art by Carmeno, and you're now locked into Decoded.
Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Question that I never necessarily answer because I don't plan that far ahead. I just live in the here and now. I get grief for it all the time, but yeah, I like to live in the here and now. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone in 5 years.
Growing up in Sheffield, how did the city influence your creativity?
I don't really know, to be fair. I'd probably say that literally the art that I create now is very much representation of the life that I've lived. I said that it's probably not been a stereotypical upbringing. It's obviously had lots of different contributions and influence.
What was your first introduction to art then?
My first proper introduction to it was a combination of two things. My mum, in my household, my mum always used to have art on the wall. So from a very young age, seeing it was inspirational. But then on the flip side to that, my dad's obviously very artistic as well. And he used to do portraits of celebrities or families. So when we used to have a music festival called Music in the Sun, he used to have a little stall or a stand when he weren't obviously emceeing stages. And he'd just put some of the pictures that he'd have and put them up for sale. So I think probably in that aspect, it was one of the things where I thought, you know, if I was artistic, you can make money from it basically.
What made you want to start, painting, creating, designing on a more full-time premise?
The honest answer is I don't think there was ever a time when I wanted to do that. I think it all naturally just kind of fell into place just by almost accident and chance, really. Like I've said before, I went to uni, I finished uni, I didn't want to do the whole grad scheme stuff. And at the time, I was into buying and selling trainers quite heavily, but I was more so creative. So I just literally one day thought, I'm gonna start customizing shoes, and literally 10 years down the line, it led to where I am now.
What's the process like when you start creating a new piece? Is it planned? Is it freestyle? Is it commission?
I think it depends on the person, really, the individual. I think for me and how my process works is it's always definitely planned. There's always a method. There's always a reason for a lot of the things that I create. Whether that's a collaborative process in terms of somebody else giving me an initial idea and then me being able to run away with it. Or again, just I've had an idea and then I try to research and look up things that can obviously add a little bit more influence or depth to the story. And then, go from there, really.
How would you describe your art style?
It's a very good question, and people ask me that all the time, especially people who I haven't seen for a long time, and they're like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I do art. And then they're like, asking me to describe it, and I'm like, I don't know how to describe it. Because again, I always just think that I'm still very new to it, so it's hard for me to self-evaluate what it is that I do. But if I was to put a category, I'd probably say it's an element of modern contemporary pop art. That's how I'd describe it. And even that could be wrong, but that's how I perceive it. So,
what's the most memorable commission you've worked on?
Memorable? I don't know. There's two or three, and I think again, art in itself is very subjective because something that I would perceive to be a memorable project wouldn't necessarily be the same for somebody else. Like if you mentioned it obviously off camera just before that I'd done a collaboration with Xbox and Ubisoft, which on the grand scheme of things, just a lad from Sheffield working with a global brand like that, it's probably monumental in that aspect. But then for me, probably the human side of it is I've liked the more over the time, the intimate projects in terms of things that have played a part in somebody else's life, and that's not even necessarily just in Sheffield, but that's across the pond, in America or in Asia or wherever it was. Creating shoes for a proposal, or creating shoes that were literally worn by the groom for a wedding. So for me, from my perspective, it's even though I'm not there, I was a part of that day because I've created that for that couple, and that's a part of that. So things like that mean a bit more to me than just the whistles and bells of global brands.
What's been the biggest challenge in your artistic journey?
I always feel like, growing an audience, growing a following, and the challenges of probably trying to take it to market are probably going to be the biggest obstacles that probably any artist faces, especially when they're trying to be independent and create something for themselves, which for me is probably been a little bit different because in a way, you could call it a sponsor, you could call it a manager, you could call it whatever you want, where effectively I've had that in the latter years with my artistic side of things, where I effectively get commissioned to create art, whereas some artists out there, have to probably go their entire life creating art in a hope to, make it big and, sell their art around the world. But then I suppose my position and my ability to make money from art like I do now has come from 7 or 8 years previous customizing trainers and building that audience myself. But I suppose in terms of answering the question more thoroughly, when I first started, when I didn't have anything and I didn't have no support, it was just that willingness to not accept no for an answer. So it was, I'll go up in people's DMs and I'll message celebrities or footballers or whoever it was. And at the end of the day, my opinion was, if I can send 100 DMs and I'm only going to get a response to one, then that's better than no response at all. So yeah, I just said, be patient, but also be willing to not accept no for an answer.
If you could collaborate with any artist, dead or alive, who would it be?
I don't necessarily know an artist that I'd probably want to collaborate with, but I think probably just in terms of the way the world is now and the influence of like celebrities and stuff like that. An idol of mine's always been Ian Wright, so I think if I was going to do a creative project, I'd love to be able to hit him up and be like, let's create something. So yeah, that'd be good.
All right. How do you want your art to impact people?
Probably through a sense of belonging. Because I think a lot, like I said, a lot of the things that I do try to create, whether it's personal or commission based, is very much from experience. But I'm always mindful of like my view and my opinion towards the stuff that I create. I want it to have a different meaning and an understanding for the audience that's looking at it. So there's some things that I've created where I've implemented memories of my own, and it tells a story through what I've produced, if I'm in a position to be able to talk about it. But it's also from let's say from an audience perspective, when you're looking at it through the pop culture references as well, is that you're able to look at the things that I create, and it should bring a memory or an element of happiness to you, in terms of being able to relive maybe a memory from your childhood when you look at it. So that's how it's more of a, not for me, but for everybody. That's how I like it to be.
What's one piece of advice you give to your younger self?
To have more self-belief, I think. I think probably from a younger age, even probably still now, I probably have to tell myself that a lot. I have more self-belief in that sense, because I think it's probably not even just me. I think it's a lot of people in today's world tend to beat themselves up a little bit, rather than having that bit more self-belief and just pushing you to obviously go out there and do things.
What's the worst piece of advice someone has ever given you?
When I was at college and I was doing a fashion HND, you often have people that come in and do talks, like motivational talks and whatever. And at the time, we had somebody, and he came in and he was some art guy or buyer or seller or whatever it was for like Primark or something at the time. And I think it was more how he spoke about how he got into the market, which for me, it was a negative at the time, because it was very clear that the stepping stones that he'd been handed to get to where he was wasn't the same opportunity that I was gonna be able to get, you understand? So like, you've either got family with deep pockets or friends in high places. So for me, straight away, that was like, it's almost an impossible task for me to get to his level. So that was a negative, because that put me off wanting to do it, you understand? But then on the flip side to that, still to this day, the positive side of it, because I always believe there's a positive in every negative, is that remembering that how I felt in that moment, has contributed to motivate me still to this point. To now where, like, say for example, if I do give talks in schools or talk to young people at colleges or whatever, I'm always super mindful, especially when I'm talking to young people, of how I come across. So it's not like, like it's a me. It's not all, it should never just be about, what I'm doing, what I've done, what I've achieved. It's always trying to come from a place where it's motivational and inspirational for young people to believe that whatever they want to do, they can do it.
If you could eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I don't know. This is a funny question, because one, I eat Kurdistan quite a lot. On the breaks from the studio, so I go there quite a lot. But no, if I could have one meal, mutton and rice, explain feelings. In what sense?
Okay, next one. Worst impulse buy that you still own?
Worst impulse buy? I don't know, probably a pair of trainers.
Best chocolate of all time?
I like Cadbury's, but there's a specific one, you can't get it anymore, but I used to love it as a kid and I always wish that they'd bring it back and it'd be the same, it'd be Cadbury's Marble Bar. I still think about it to these days. That's a hard chocolate bar still.
Favorite sitcom?
One that I'm watching at this moment, and I don't even know if it'd be classed as a sitcom, but Afterlife, Ricky Gervais. It's got a deep meaning still.
Best player of all time?
Best player of all time?
Football.
Again, very subjective question. If we're going all time, I'll say Messi.
Tea or coffee?
Tea, even though I don't really drink both, but tea.
What are 3 things you can't live without?
Music, family, and my art.
What does your downtime look like outside of art?
Football, PlayStation, and again, family, that's it.
What's your go-to karaoke song?
Never participated in karaoke ever, so none.
If you get to design your own sneaker collab, what's the concept?
I don't know what the concept would be, but it'd definitely be linked to where I'm from.
If you weren't doing art, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
Something that don't make me happy.
If you had to sum up your artistic journey in one sentence, what would it be?
Incomplete.
How do you want to be remembered?
Humble.
What would you ask the next guest?
What motivates them to the position where they've got now? But probably most importantly, what can you take from where you are now